All right, welcome everyone to Loudoun Agile Network. Today we have a great speaker, Shawn Wallack, who's going to talk about unlock Agile metrics. It's a very important topic. Like, who doesn't like metrics? And metric is an amazing topic. Like, can't tell anymore. So how are we driving the outcomes, not just reports? So that's a great topic. Shawn is talking today. A little bit about Shawn as an agile coach with 30 years of experience in software development, and started as a developer, a business analyst, project manager, and has taken up agile and scaled agile, the SPC, RTE, and all the trainings and good things he has done. Currently, he is working for CGI, but he's also doing a lot of federal consulting. Shawn, as a pragmatic agilist, challenges conventional wisdom, debunks agile myths, and advocates for outcome-driven approaches. He has trained and coached teams for over 15 years, helping them move beyond process theater to real improvements in collaboration, predictability, and delivery. So, a recognized expert in agile planning and workflow delivery, he emphasizes effective team structures, single task force, focus, and clear work visualizations. Okay, so whether coaching executives or working hands-on with team, he blends skepticism, discipline, and touch of irrelevance to cut through complexity and drive real results. So many great things, Shawn, and without further ado, I will give it to Shawn to go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the kind introduction. I think it's appropriate that I start by saying that I'm speaking tonight for myself and not for CGI Federal. I am a CGI Federal employee, but tonight it's just Shawn. All right. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes, we do.
Okay, great. So I won't say much more than has already just been said about me. I think it all comes down to what I call practical agility. The State of DevOps report that I read fairly recently pointed out that the right metrics and the right practices are what help high-performing teams deliver. They said 2 to 3 times faster and with fewer failures. But still, somehow, up to 70% of agile transformations fall short. Projects are still failing. Why? Well, metrics is a big part of that. And what I think is that too often teams are tracking everything: velocity, burn down charts, defect counts, and so on. We'll talk about many, but they're improving nothing. And worse, they're chasing the wrong goals, right? So velocity over value, or beautiful burn downs instead of meaningful flow. Dashboards drowning in data that never leads to action. And my bet is that that probably sounds familiar to some of you. And that's why we're here today, right? So I'm not here to rant about metrics or to introduce magic new metrics. I'm here to hopefully sort of flip how you see them. And this isn't really about prettier reports or more numbers to impress the boss. It's about turning data into decisions that actually work. And my hope is that by the end of the session, you'll know how to spot the metrics that matter and ditch the ones that don't, and sort of arm your teams with practical ways to succeed. So let's cut through the noise and let's get to what I think was just advertised as everybody's favorite topic: metrics. So here's our plan for tonight. We're going to talk about why metrics fail, how to use them effectively, and which ones work. And actually, I kind of lied, because this isn't really a discussion about metrics. It's not about better metrics. It's about better outcomes. So meet the WATCH team, Water Analytics and Technology Control Hub. This is a fictional Agile team managing reservoir, water flow, flood prevention. They, forgive me, they swim in data, water levels, rainfall capacity. But when a surge hit, their metrics did not save them. They had numbers, not answers. That probably sounds familiar. Agile teams do that all the time, optimizing dashboards instead of optimizing results, collecting data but not acting, or misreading the story. So throughout this session, we're going to use the Watch Teams challenges to explore how our real Agile teams can avoid their mistakes and track what matters, interpret it wisely, and turn information into action. So let's take a step back. We all know that Agile runs on empiricism. We base decisions on observations and experience, not assumptions and speculation. And the three pillars that support empiricism are transparency, inspection, and adaptation. Transparency, seeing what's really happening. Inspection, spotting trends in the data. And adaptation, of course, is acting on what we learn, right? Having data is not enough. Transparency without focus is just noise. And inspection without action is pointless. And adaptation without context is just going to lead to bad decisions. And that's where a lot of teams stumble, in my opinion. And metrics can either help or hurt. So let's get back to the watch team now. A dam gauge, that's D-A-M, a dam gauge reads 87 feet. That's a metric. But what does it mean? Is that high? Is that low? Is that good? Is that bad? Should we act? Should we ignore it? We have no idea. It's just a number. Same with Agile, right? A team reports 35 story points in a sprint. Is that good? Is that bad? Is it improving? Is it declining? Without context, we don't know. Now, picture a time series chart showing water levels over several hours. Suddenly, we see if the water is rising or stable, and that's information, not just data. Agile teams need the same, right? Velocity trends over multiple sprints reveal patterns, not just isolated numbers. But here's the kicker, right? Knowing the trend isn't enough. Rising water could mean that our new system is working or that a storm is coming, right? A velocity spike could mean progress, or it could mean irrational story point inflation. Metrics don't speak for themselves. Without context, they can be very misleading. Dashboards don't drive action. Insights do. So, the three pillars of empiricism, transparency, inspection, and adaptation, that's what helps teams make informed decisions. But you need all three. Transparency without inspection is pointless, right? Data might be visible, but if it's inaccurate, if it's out of date, then it's not going to be effective for decision making. And there's no point to being transparent if you don't review and analyze the data. The watch team saw the water levels on the gauges, but if they hadn't looked at trends, they wouldn't have known if levels were rising or falling. And inspection without adaptation is dangerous. If we analyze the data but fail to act, then what was the point of the analysis? It's just a waste of time, right? So adaptation is the point, but it needs to be intentional. It needs to be precise. So decisions should be based on the right information, not just reacting to the numbers without context. And inspection fails when we misread what the data is telling us. If we assume that the water is rising because of the new software, but we don't check for external factors like a storm, then we risk misinterpreting the cause. right? So adaptation fails when teams don't act or act too late. And if we realize too late that a storm is causing the rise, or if we panic and we dump too much water too soon, then bad decisions are going to follow. And agile teams fall into these traps all the time. We track velocity, burn down, defect rates. But if we focus on the wrong numbers, we miss the real problem. We analyze trends, but if we misread the cause, we take the wrong action. We collect the data, but if we fail to act, what was the point? That's why metrics alone don't solve problems. It's how we use them that matters. So when any of these pillars fail, data is either unavailable or lost in the noise or misleading. But even with all the right information, we still have a problem, and that's that dashboards don't solve anything. But here's where a lot of teams go wrong. Transparency requires that focus. Inspection without adaptation is waste. Adaptation without real understanding is going to lead to bad decisions. And that's what happens when teams track the wrong metrics or misinterpret the ones they have. So let's talk about that next. All right. Dashboards radiate information, but again, they don't solve problems. People do. Actions do. And agile teams often assume that more data is going to lead to better decisions. But numbers alone don't create insight. Imagine your speedometer reads 55 miles per hour. Is that fast? I don't know. That depends. Are you on a highway? Are you in a school zone? Are you driving on ice? Right? The number alone really doesn't tell us anything until we understand the situation. The watch team has a dashboard. They track everything: water levels, flow rates, system pressure. But that doesn't mean that they always know what to do. A rising water level could mean a storm, a dam failure, or just normal fluctuations. The number doesn't tell them what action to take. And agile teams face the same situation. A burn down chart, a velocity report, a defect count is just a number until we ask, if there's a rising defect count, is quality better or worse? How's test coverage? We see a sudden spike in velocity. Is that an improvement, or is that story point inflation? A dropping burn down, is that real progress, or is that just because we're closing tasks or stories prematurely? The problem isn't with dashboards themselves, it's with how we use them, right? So a good dashboard raises the right questions and then triggers action. If the watch team sees water levels rising, they don't just log the numbers and move on, they investigate, right? And agile teams should do the same. When dashboards are used as a starting point for decision-making and not as a scoreboard, they become powerful tools for improvement. By the way, tracking a metric is not free. Every piece of data you collect takes tools, time, effort, attention, money, right? The watch team learned this the hard way. They tracked everything, every sensor, every reading, every possible data point. And when a crisis hit, they were drowning in data and they missed what mattered. Agile teams overtrack all the time. Velocity, cycle time, defects, you name it. Half don't help. A good metric has a purpose. What decision does it drive? If it changes, do we act? If not, then that's just noise. Don't track what you're not going to use. So think of metrics the way you think of features. A good metric is going to have a purpose and a clear return on investment. And there's a cost to bad metrics. It's like using let's go back to the car. It's like using a car speedometer as the only measure of your driving performance. You might be going fast, but are you heading in the right direction? Are you burning too much fuel? Are your brakes failing? Focusing on the wrong data can give you a false sense of security until it's too late to fix. Bad metrics work the same way. If we track everything, we prioritize nothing. So before tracking a metric, ask, what decision does this metric help us make? Would we change our behavior based on this data? If this number goes up or down, do we know what we would do next? If we can't answer those questions, we probably don't need the metric, right? So every metric should earn its place on your dashboard by helping you improve. Otherwise, it's just expensive, wasteful noise. Would you spend money building a product feature no one uses? Then why would you track a metric no one acts on? So metrics are signals, but without context, they can mislead us. And the watch team, they once saw steady water levels. They assumed everything was fine, but they failed to notice that flow rates had slowed. The reservoir wasn't refilling. Now, the problem wasn't what they were measuring, it's what they weren't measuring. Agile teams experience the same thing. Velocity's up, we're measuring that, but are defects up? Test coverage is high, but are the tests good tests? Burn down charts show progress, but are teams cutting corners to hit deadlines? So how do we avoid being misled? Measure what matters, not just what's easy. Triangulate with multiple data points. No single metric tells the full story. A drop in velocity means very little without also checking defect trends, work complexity, team health. Measure what informs action. If a measure isn't helping the team inspect and adapt, it's just noise. Look for trends, not isolated numbers. One bad sprint is a blip. Patterns over time, that's what reveals what's really happening. And ask why before reacting. A surprising metric should trigger an investigation, not panic. And just because we can measure something doesn't mean we should. Metrics should help us inspect and adapt and improve. If they're not doing that, they're just distractions. Okay, so we've talked about how metrics can be misleading, but obviously that doesn't mean that we should ignore them. And the best teams use metrics to drive improvement, not just to prove a point, right? So a single data point like a dip in velocity means nothing on its own. What matters is the trend. Are we improving? Are we experimenting? Are we learning? Metrics belong in retrospectives, not as a scorecard, but as a conversation starter. If a team sees that cycle time has increased, the question isn't, why are we worse? But what changed? Is this temporary? Are we working on more complex stories? Right? So high-performing teams adjust based on what they learned from these conversations. Low-performing teams explain why the number isn't accurate. Again, if your metric isn't helping you get better, it's just wasting your time. And by the way, metrics don't just measure behavior, they influence behavior. Teams will adjust their behavior based on what's being tracked. So when a metric becomes a performance target instead of a decision-making tool, teams are going to stop using it to improve, and they're going to just start gaming it to look good. So metrics should align with business goals. But when teams feel pressured to hit numbers at any cost, the real goal is going to get forgotten. You press a team to increase their velocity or give them the impression that you're comparing velocity across teams, then they'll just start sizing 2-point stories as 3-point stories, and like magic, velocity will jump. But there won't be any real improvements. In fact, the only thing that will have happened is that velocity will no longer have any usefulness to anybody on the program. Imagine if the watch team were incentivized to have fewer flood alerts. They might suppress the alerts just to meet the performance target. They might ignore rising pressure levels because leadership only tracks total order volume levels. So on paper, the dashboard looks great, but in reality, damn is about to fail. Agile teams fall into the same trap. Instead of improving, they adjust behavior to make the numbers look good, right? Velocity inflation. Teams inflate story points to create the illusion of increased output, even when they're not delivering any additional value. Or burn down manipulation. Teams break the work into artificially small blocks just to smooth out the chart, rather than reflecting real progress in the context of value delivery. Or defect hiding. The teams start underreporting issues to meet quality KPIs, right? Masking problems instead of improving quality. Or test coverage gaming. Teams write shallow, meaningless tests just to push the percentage higher because somebody said that our target is 80% test coverage. Okay, but you're not really improving testing effectiveness. Or cutting meetings in the name of improving efficiency. So we are having fewer meetings, but we're collaborating less, right? We're not as aligned as we were. Look, teams don't game metrics because they're made with they're bad people. They do it because the system is incentivizing the wrong behaviors. Velocity inflation creates the illusion of speed. Defect hiding makes leadership think quality is improving. OKR manipulation ensures that goals are met, but ambition drops through the floor. So if a metric drives the wrong behavior, it's not helping, it's hurting. When the focus is on looking good rather than on improving, metrics have stopped being useful. So if a metric can be gamed, does that mean we should stop using them? No, not at all. Of course not. The key isn't tracking fewer numbers, it's tracking the right ones in the right way. Metrics should help us inspect, adapt, and improve. They should not just be a reporting activity. So how do we use them without getting misled? All right, so first of all, not every metric serves the same purpose. And if we understand the different types of metrics and how they fit together, we can use them to drive improvement rather than create confusion. So the goal isn't to track everything. It's to track what actually helps you make better decisions, right? A metric should provide insight, not just data. And there are a lot of ways that you can organize metrics. This shows 7 categories that you might find helpful. You could probably have organized these in a variety of different ways. But let's just think about it. There are flow metrics, how smoothly is work moving through the system, predictability metrics, how reliably are teams meeting their commitments, value and quality metrics, are we delivering meaningful outcomes? There are productivity metrics, how efficient are our teams working? By the way, often the most misused / abused category. There are DORA metrics, balancing speed and stability, space metrics for a holistic view of productivity beyond just outputs, people metrics like team morale and customer satisfaction, engagement, things of that nature. And then, of course, you've got things like OKRs and KPIs that don't really fit neatly into a single category, but they act as goal setting and tracking mechanisms that can influence multiple of these categories. And look, when we focus on business value and strategic outcomes, the metrics are useful. But when they become performance targets, they lead to gaming. They lead to misaligned incentives. Now, this deck covers about 25 metrics, and I'm going to talk about every one of them right now at lightning speed. but I'm only going to focus on how I would game them. Okay? Because I assume you know what they are, and I'm just going to tell you how I would game them. So let's play the Agile metrics game. First up is going to be flow, because if it's not moving, if work's not moving efficiently, nothing else matters. So flow metrics are all about how smoothly work moves through your system. So think efficiency, not just speed. And lead times, the total time from request to delivery. Shorter sounds awesome, right? So I will accelerate lead time by skipping pesky safety checks. Dashboard's green. That's what counts. Cycle time. Well, that's how long stories are actively being worked on. Shorten it and we're golden. So I'll just mark stuff done before testing. Bonus time for me. Throughput. That's how many items we complete in a set time box. More means progress, right? Great. I will split every task into a dozen atomic pieces. Look at those wins. Low efficiency, that measures work time versus wait time. High efficiency is the dream until I fudge in progress for stuff that's sitting idle. Numbers don't lie, right? Release frequency. How often we ship work. Frequent releases scream Agile, unless I'm just tweaking nonsense to pad the stats. Activity is what matters. Block time tracks how long work's been stalled by dependencies. Less is better, except I'll just relabel blocked as low priority. Problem solved. DORA metrics, they come from DevOps research, like in Accelerate. And they measure delivery performance. So deployment frequency, that's how often we push changes live. High numbers look slick, right? So I'll just deploy pointless updates hourly. Leadership loves the hustle. Lead time for changes. Well, that's how fast code goes from commit to production. Quick is king, unless I skip reviews to hit the mark. Speed's the goal, right? Change failure rate. Tracks how often deployments flop. Lower's better. But I will dodge big fixes to keep it clean. No failures, no worries. Mean time to restore. That is a measurement of recovery speed after a crash. Fast MTTR, that's what shines until I stop logging small outages. Nothing to fix, nothing to report. Predictability metrics. That's what helps teams plan reliably, not just hit quotas. Velocity is how much work we finish per sprint. Steady is great until I inflate points to impress you. More is always better, right? I can triple velocity next sprint, no problem. Committed versus done. That compares our plans to our results. Matching is ideal. Who doesn't want to be predictable? Unless I start sandbagging commitments to guarantee 100%. Safe bets win. Quality metrics, business value metrics. Well, that gauges if we're delivering well, not just fast. So escape defects, that counts bugs in production. Fewer is fantastic, except I'll hide small bugs to keep it low. Who needs to know? Test coverage, that measures code tested automatically, right? Higher is safer until I write junk tests to juice the percentages. Coverage is king. Productivity metrics tracks effort, but effort's not value. Number of commits counts code pushes. More productivity, right? Great. I will commit every typo fix separately. Busy is the vibe. Utilization. Well, that measures time spent working. 100%. Well, that screams efficiency until I'm so slammed I can't think. Full throttle. That's the dream. Space metrics. That widens productivity to include well-being, teamwork, beyond just output, right? So satisfaction and well-being to check team morale. Happy is the goal. Unless I fake survey smiles to dodge the tough conversations. Everyone's thrilled, right? Or performance and activity. They track how much work is done. High output rocks, except I'll tweak settings nonstop for fake progress. Busy beats useful. OKRs, KPIs, they align team on goals when they're not performative, right? OKRs set big objectives, ambitious, sounds noble, until I hide issues to reduce emergencies, goal met, crisis ignored. KPIs measure key results, right? Hitting them is clutch, except I'll tweak definitions to make it look good. The numbers don't care. People metrics, they focus on team and customer experience, soft stuff that's hard to fake. Team happiness, that gauges morale. High scores rule until I pressure everyone to say great and then hide the burnout. CSAT, customer satisfaction scores. Happy users win, except I'll only survey our fans and skip the complainers. Perfect scores incoming. So I just rushed through how I could game like 24 metrics. Bravo for me. Look, sometimes it's intentional. I'll pad velocity with bloated points, or I'll hide defects to dodge blame. Other times it's accidental, right? Rushing lead time, skipping steps I didn't mean to cut. But if you tell me the focus is numbers over outcomes, then I will find a way to make the numbers look good, even when nothing's actually improving, right? Inflating story points, splitting tasks for throughput, faking in progress for flow efficiency, cherry picking happy customers for CSAT surveys. I'll do all of it if that's how I'm being incentivized. It's not about being sneaky. It's just what happens when the system rewards dashboards over results. A good metric should shine a light on bottlenecks. Show me where we're stuck and how to fix it. It should not turn me into a stat magician who is incentivized to game the system for applause. So let's make metrics work for us, shall we? So we spent a lot of time talking about how individual metrics can be misleading and that there's a problem with chasing a single number. It never tells the full story. Every metric we talked about can be gamed, but what happens when we connect them? Let's say team's velocity is rising. On its own, that sounds great. But what if defect rates are also rising? If customer satisfaction is dropping? Suddenly velocity doesn't look so impressive anymore, right? Good teams don't obsess over a single number. They recognize that real insight is going to come from patterns, relationships among the metrics, and context, not from isolated gauge measurements. All right, that's a lesson that the watch team learned the hard way. One number is never enough. A single metric can be very misleading, right? Good teams don't chase isolated numbers. They look at multiple signals together. The watch team for months focused on water level readings. The dashboard showed the reservoir was stable, so everything seemed fine. But they weren't tracking flow rate. Water wasn't moving as expected. It was building up upstream, putting pressure on the dam. And by the time they connected the dots, they'd missed a critical warning sign. That happens in Agile too, right? A high velocity might seem great until defects skyrocket. A fast cycle time might look efficient, but what if quality is suffering? A team that meets every commitment might look reliable, but what if they're burning out? It's not sustainable. That's why metrics have to be viewed together, holistically, across multiple dimensions. So think of it as sort of a balanced scorecard of metrics. Now, the 6 sample metrics on this slide, these are certainly not the only ones that you could track, but I think they provide a strong balance of efficiency, predictability, and impact. And the right selection of metrics is always going to be dependent on your team's context. The point is that a single metric alone will never tell you the full story and is very easy to game. A thoughtful combination is going to tell you what's really happening. We could track dozens of metrics, but I picked these 6 because I think they provide a pretty well-rounded view of efficiency, speed, customer impact, team morale. The right mix is going to vary, but this is a strong place to start. Just don't track everything. Be selective. Remember, tracking data has a cost, right? So where do you start? Well, if a team is struggling with meeting commitments, then predictability metrics might be useful. If quality is an issue, then the value and quality metrics should be emphasized. The key is choosing metrics that are going to drive meaningful action, behavior changes. Nothing more, nothing less. And these metrics don't exist in silos. They interact with each other, right? If throughput drops, is it due to longer cycle times? If release frequency slows down, is it being caused by technical debt or quality issues? If team satisfaction, morale falls, is that linked to burnout from unrealistic commitments? Good metrics lead to better questions. And the right combination of metrics is going to give you a complete picture. So let's talk about 3 simple things that you can do to improve your metrics. First of all, ditch vanity metrics. If it doesn't drive action, stop tracking it. Measure trends, not snapshots. One bad sprint is noise. Patterns are what matter. And use metrics to start conversations. Instead of asking, why is our velocity down? Ask, what's getting in our way? Right? Good metrics should help the team improve. They shouldn't just check a box. Pick one metric that your team tracks today and ask, is this driving action? If not, adjust it, remove it, don't collect it, don't report it. Now, numbers without context, they lead to bad decisions. A Scrum team's velocity dips. Are they struggling or are they onboarding new members? A spike in defects appears. Is that quality problem or did we finally improve test coverage, right? If we react to a number without understanding it, we risk overreacting or fixing the wrong problem or making things worse. So metrics should start conversations, not end them. And the best teams don't blindly follow numbers. They use them as a signal to ask the right questions. So if leadership fixates on velocity, teams will optimize for velocity, even if it means dropping quality. If defect counts are the only measure of quality, teams are going to game the system, closing issues faster without actually improving the product, right? The key isn't reacting to numbers, it's understanding what's really happening behind them. And I'll remind you that not everything that matters can be so easily reduced to a metric. You might have heard a quote that some people attribute to Peter Drucker or sometimes W. Edwards Deming. You can't manage what you don't measure. All right, well, I've got news for you. Neither of them said that. And in fact, Deming said the opposite of that. He said, it is wrong to suppose that if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So that is 180 degrees different than the quote that's attributed to him. Why does it matter? It's because some of the most critical elements of Agile success are not captured on your dashboard. Innovation is not a number. Trust is not a number. A healthy, engaged team does not appear on your dashboard. But that doesn't mean those things aren't real, right? They're happening behind the numbers. So use your data wisely, always look at trends, always ask before reacting to a number. And remember, that many important factors like trust and collaboration and adaptability, they can't be reduced to a number. All right. Imagine you are on the watch team at the dam and your dashboard flashes an alert. Water pressure is rising. The system is processing more water than ever before. Is this a success? Should we celebrate a record-breaking flow rate thanks to our new automation, or is this a disaster? Should we evacuate because the flow rate is out of control? Celebrate or evacuate? The data alone does not tell you what to do. It only tells you what's happening. To make the right decision, you need experience, you need context. Wisdom is knowing when a trend signals success or when it signals danger. A velocity spike, are you genuinely improving or are you gaming things? A drop in defect count, is that quality improving or are teams closing issues prematurely? A faster release cadence, are we improving flow or are we rushing unstable code? The dashboard won't tell you. Experience will, expertise will, wisdom will. Not all metrics help teams improve, right? If we optimize only for what's measurable, we risk chasing numbers that don't represent success. The watch team learned this the hard way. At one point, they focused only on water levels, but when they finally realized that what matters was flow rates, it was too late. Agile teams fall into the same trap. Velocity becomes the goal. Look, our velocity is the highest ever, right? Success isn't just about tracking these numbers. It's about delivering real value, right? And the real danger of optimizing for what's easy to measure is that it blinds us to what actually matters. A good metric should lead to a better decision. So before adapting a new metric, ask, does this data help us improve? Will it help us highlight risks? Does it inform what we're going to do next? If the answer is no, then the metric is just a distraction, right? If you collect 1,000 data points, you're going to be overwhelmed. You're not going to be able to act fast enough, right? So don't track what's easy. Don't track it because Jira makes it easy and puts it right there for you. Track what's going to help make better decisions, right? Use metrics to learn, not to punish, right? Data should lead to conversations about how to improve, better discussions, smarter decisions, improvement over time. When they're used poorly, they're going to lead to fear and manipulation and a focus on the numbers over the outcomes. So if your metrics aren't driving learning, are they driving fear? If teams fear the measurement, they're going to game the numbers, right? If teams trust the measurement, they're going to improve. So if a metric isn't helping your team improve, what is it causing them to do or feel? All right, so success isn't about hitting numbers. I want to be mindful of our time. It is about continuous learning. It's about adapting and improving. It's about real outcomes, better outcomes, not just better reports. So let's not just measure stuff because we can. Let's measure things that are actually going to help us succeed, because the best metrics don't just track progress, they make your teams better. And agility is not about tracking. It's about learning and adapting and improving. Here we can see the dashboard's green, right? But they're drowning. Key takeaways. All right, covered a lot. Transparency, inspection, adaptation, data, information, knowledge, wisdom, how agile metrics can hurt teams, how they can influence behavior, good and bad, and how to avoid the unintended consequences of gaming the numbers. If you take away one thing from today, it's that the metrics that you choose should motivate action, not just populate reports, right? A dashboard that's filled with numbers means nothing if teams don't act on those insights. Data without adaptation is just noise. And not every metric is worth tracking. Good metrics are the ones that are going to help your teams make better decisions. If a number doesn't inform an action, it's a distraction. And no single metric tells the full story. Teams are going to need a balanced scorecard, a set of indicators, signals, flow, predictability, value, productivity. Focusing on just one is going to lead to tunnel vision. And the context always matters. A dip in velocity could mean a team is struggling, or it could mean they are onboarding two new team members. A spike in defects could mean quality is dropping, or it could mean teams are catching more issues earlier. Context. And finally, metrics don't just measure performance, they influence it. So if teams are rewarded for the wrong things, they're going to optimize for the wrong outcomes. So be intentional. Focus on improvement and not just the numbers. Your goal should not be better dashboards. It should be better decisions and better outcomes. So what does that mean for you personally? Well, every role has some responsibility to make metrics more meaningful, right? Because when teams misuse metrics, it's not just a reporting issue, it's a systemic problem. Scrum Masters use metrics to facilitate discussions, not just to report progress, right? Bring data into retrospectives to drive that conversation. Product owners measure the right things, prioritize value over velocity, track whether you're building the right things, not just finishing work. Developers, look at cycle time, flow efficiency, look for what's blocking you instead of chasing story points. Coaches, help teams focus on trends, not snapshots. Shift the conversation from outputs to outcomes. Leaders, measure system health, not just team speed. Optimize for sustainable delivery, not just short-term numbers. Metrics should empower, not punish. They should lead to conversations and improvements. If a metric isn't helping your team improve, it is not helping at all. And that brings us to the end. So I want to thank you for your time. I hope you found some of this of interest and value, and maybe you'll think a little bit differently about how metrics can drive improvement and not just drive reporting. And if we've got time for Q&A, I'd like you to think about, have you seen teams chasing the wrong metrics? Can you think of a metric that you've seen that's misleading or that's been gamed? Can you think of a metric that you track that's actually useless, that leads to unintended behavior or unintended consequences? What's something that you could stop tracking tomorrow and nobody would even notice? And with that, the me talking part ends and the you talking part begins.
Thank you, Shawn. That was really good. And I love your graphics and love your slides and love the examples. Excellent. And I'm sure I'm speaking for everybody here. All right, folks, it's time for questions. If anyone has questions, I don't see anything in chat. Please feel free to unmute yourself and ask away any questions that you have on metrics.
Have I been on mute for 45 minutes?
I do see excellent from Bilal. I do see well done from Lucy. This was great. Thank you very much. Coming from PEDA. So yes, this session is recorded. So now please feel free to unmute yourself.
Yes, good evening. Any metric you could recommend for the backlog, like managing the backlog? Like I tend to have a lot of folks who like to put tickets in and we don't make a lot of progress moving those tickets along. So.
Metrics for managing the backlog.
Yeah.
There are a lot of ways that we can answer that question. I guess it sort of means, what do you mean by managing the backlog?
Like, so I guess how do you change the behavior in terms of, or finding a metric that will get people focused on not just creating tickets and filling up the backlog with tickets, but also helping to move the tickets that we currently have in our backlog or that have been sitting in the backlog along, right? Or yeah,
Oh,
so
yeah. So I mean, a couple of things jump to mind. One of them would be, for example, lead time and cycle time, which if I'm still sharing, am I still sharing?
yes.
Yes.
You want to be able to evaluate the age of the things in your backlog. So if something has been in your backlog and has not changed status, hasn't been planned into a sprint, and it's been in there for weeks or months or years, which I've seen,
Yes.
and it can be very helpful to produce a dashboard, set aside whether it's an hour a week or 4 hours one time. It sort of depends on your situation, but take a look at that. If you haven't touched it in a year, the probability is it was never a good idea.
Yeah, right.
Just get rid of it and get it
Okay.
out there. You know, Jira has a resolution called won't do. You don't have to delete it. You just mark
Right.
it as closed, won't do, and it's out of your backlog. And then you look at things like cycle time, and you start sort of promoting the idea that we want to see things flowing out of the backlog, not building up in the backlog. The backlog is inventory. The backlog, by definition, is waste, right? It's where ideas begin to lose value because you haven't delivered them, right? Imagine having
Right.
some great ideas for, I don't know, something related to the holidays. Well, it was a great idea in November, and in January, it's a horrible idea, right? So ideas in the backlog don't age well. So you need to set aside time to be very conscientious about managing your backlog and making sure that at any time it is only populated with the things that you're going to do now, next, soon, later, in that order, and then the other stuff gets out.
Okay, I'm writing that down. That was good. Thank you.
I wrote an article on LinkedIn about now, next, soon, later, never. If you're on LinkedIn, you can look for that.
Okay, thank you.
Great question, Jacqueline. Thank you for asking. Yeah, go ahead.
So this is great. Thank you very much. So with all the changes that are coming in right now, right, with the AI and so many things, do you see any of these going obsolete or any new metrics coming in? Because the speed has become going to get crazy, right? I mean, yeah. So do you see any changes to these metrics or anything like that?
Well, I think it's going to introduce a lot of interesting new challenges. I'll tell you what. I can't get into specific projects, but I can tell you that I've had interactions with an AI engine where I ask it, for example, to refine a set of stories, and in 2 minutes it can generate dozens and dozens and dozens of them. And I'll say, well, I don't really like that format. Can you write it in this format and include acceptance criteria written in the Gherkin format? And in 2 minutes, it's done that. So I think that that's going to change the focus of a lot of our teams from doing things like writing stories to evaluating stories that AI has written. And that's going to change, that's going to introduce new metrics, essentially, like how fast can you get through the noise of what AI is able to produce. I don't know exactly how that's going to manifest itself in terms of changing the metrics, but it's definitely going to change the nature of the work that we do. That's for sure. I hear a lot of people talking about AI doing the coding, in which case the work that we're going to do is going to change maybe from, in some cases, from coding to quality checking the code. And we'll have to shift our, the amount of time it takes to produce the code is going to become de minimis. but the amount of time that it takes to quality check the code is going to increase, I would suspect, simply because there's going to be more code. So it's not so much that the metrics themselves are going to change as it is the context in which we're evaluating them is going to change, right? So, oh wow, cycle time is through the roof for development. Yeah, because we've got AI working on it, but quality has gone in the toilet because AI is writing terrible code. That's a problem. Doesn't change the metrics, it changes the context.
Yeah.
Okay.
AI started hallucinating.
Great question, Peda, and I think excellent answer. I think it's a perfect segue. We actually have an amazing topic next month, which is new ways of working powered by AI. And our presenter for our next month's event is actually with us here today, all the way from New Zealand, Shane Hasty. So Shane, do you want to talk a little bit just to introduce your talk and perhaps folks like Peda can join and understand more what's coming our way.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
Shawn, thank you for that beautiful one, for your great talk, but also that beautiful segue. It's almost an advertisement for my session next month. Because we will be digging deep into how do the AI, generative AI tools enhance and accelerate the work of agile development teams. And we'll be looking at the workflows, at the things like cycle time. You know, what if the team structures, even if we've got AI as a teammate, what roles might shift, might change? What is our, if we can generate user stories, acceptance criteria, working prototypes, mock-ups, and we can get them out in minutes and hours, what used to take days and weeks. Well, where does the bottleneck come? What is a 2-week sprint too long? What do our life cycle models look like? What are the techniques? What are the skills that we as agile practitioners need to lean into? And Shawn, you're absolutely right. The shift from very often from author to editor is a significant mindset shift, because I'm used to producing all of these user stories, and yet now I can sit down and in 10 minutes I can have 150 user stories with Gherkin acceptance criteria, probably scripted for Selenium. Well, great. Are they the right user stories? And that critical thinking, deeply human skill set that the AI tools don't have are the things where we bring the value and we shift the bottlenecks, we shift a lot of the activities. So yeah, that's the 1 minute overview, 2-minute overview.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for answering that, Shane. And folks, please don't forget to sign up. We really have an amazing topic next month, and I'm definitely looking forward to all the insights that Shane is going to bring to us. With that, Anju, do you want to
so
do the
I do
honors?
see, hold on, I do see a raised hand from Arun. Arun, is there something which can be addressed quickly? It's 8:03.
Yes, awesome presentation. Thanks a lot, Shawn. Really appreciate that. And unfortunately, I missed the first 20 minutes of this session. Are we gonna share the recording of this session?
Yes,
And
I spent the first 20 minutes talking about myself. It was no big deal.
and this deck as well. I mean, your presentation was fantastic, Shawn.
Thank you.
Yes, it was.
Welcome.
Thank you. I still have more questions, but I know we have to go. So it was good.
I don't have to go, so if you can reach out to me on LinkedIn, or I can stay on the line if that's permitted. I don't know.
Yeah, sure. So if
You can wait. I
yeah,
can wait with Shawn.
yeah, sure, go ahead.
I wanted to ask about test coverage, like what's a good metrics for measuring the effectiveness of your, the testing coverage. So we're doing a lot of like shifting left on testing and quality. And so we're creating, a lot of test cases, automated test cases, but how do we know we're right, doing it's effective, right? Like it's really, like you said, we just don't want to say, now we're, increase the number of test cases from 100 to whatever, 200 or whatever, but are we being effective, or even reducing the amount of manual testing and now doing more automated testing? How do I, get a sense of, are we, is it effective what we're doing, right? So not just producing more test cases, whether automated or manual, or doing more testing, but yeah. So, and I know the simple thing would be, okay, do we have any bugs, or something like that? But
Yeah,
is there...
no, you want to think about it as a sort of like I guess a ratio, right? You don't want to count your tests. You want to evaluate the effectiveness of your tests. And we would evaluate the effectiveness of our tests is by how many defects they expose. So you could come up with a measure of the volume of defects versus the number of tests or something along those lines, and establish some objective for yourself that, some reasonable ratio where when you increase the number of tests, you are also increasing the number of defects found by those tests, as opposed to increasing the number of tests, but the number of defects being found is not changing at all. I know you can sort of think about that as a defect detection rate, something along those lines. That would probably be more effective than just counting tests.
Exactly.
You can also think about, a lot of people talk about code coverage. Somebody wrote like, oh, 80% code coverage or 90% code coverage. All right, but doesn't it sort of depend on the 90%? What if the 10% that you're not covering is the single most important feature?
Right.
It's in the whole system that doesn't even factor into your overly simplistic 90%. So we should probably be thinking about code coverage versus feature risk, right?
Okay.
So yes, you've got a lot of code coverage, but are you covering the riskiest features? Are you covering the features that are used by the largest number of your user community, right? So get away from just thinking about things as volume, and think about the outcome that you're trying to seek. More tests should produce more defects, and more tests should be covering the right stuff. So think about it that way.
Okay, that's a good one. Yeah, we're always, so a lot of developers doing a lot more unit tests, and then I'll say, well, why didn't we catch this? When a bug comes up, it's like, well, didn't you have a unit test for that, or why didn't the unit test catch this? And I just asked just to be curious, like to understand how they are deciding what to write unit tests for, and then like you said, how does it translate to
if you tell them that you're counting how many unit tests they are going to run, then they're going to write a lot of empty unit tests.
Yeah, I don't tell them that, but they spend a lot of time doing it, right? So, and we do, like you said, we publish the number, like, oh, the code coverage and how many unit tests we've added, and in our project plans, we allocate, the time for the developers to add the unit tests. So, but then I'm saying, okay, if we're still finding something in production, or a user is reporting an issue, then I'll go to them and, well, why didn't we, we're doing all this effort, adding the, which is great, we don't want you not to do that, but it goes back to, are we doing it effectively, right? Is it effective? So
always think about the outcome you're trying to achieve. Why are you collecting this metric? And is there a different metric that can influence the outcome?
Okay.
Right? That's what you want the metric to do. Influence the behavior and change the outcome, not influence the behavior and change the metric.
Right. I see. Okay. Thank you. That was it for me. I appreciate you staying a little bit extra over. Okay.
Anybody who knows me knows I love talking.
I love you talk with your hands. You're very
I gesticulate. I'm from New York.
I figured that. I was like, that's a New Yorker there. And very passionate.
It
so,
explains a lot.
Yes.
I just have to get over my shyness problem.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's true. You're pretty shy.
All right, 6 minutes past 8. I would like to request Anju to please help us close.
Sure. So thank you so much, Shawn, for this amazing presentation. So I did enjoy every bit of it, and I'm pretty sure everyone else did, based on all the comments and feedback we are already seeing coming through. So thank you so much for amazing presentation, for your time, and thanks everyone for joining us. Looking forward to have you guys join our next session, which is April 10th. And as our speaker already introduced, the topic is how you can integrate AI in your agile ways of working. So with that, thanks everyone. Thank you for
Thank
joining.
you. Have a good night. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.